Brendan Rodgers has quit the club for a second time and leaves Celtic on the receiving end of a savage parting shot from the club's board. Remarkably, 73-year-old Martin O'Neill has been named as interim manager 25 years after he was first appointed at the club. More on that in a moment, but Celtic announced just before 10 p.m. last night that Rodgers had offered his resignation and it had been accepted. It follows the defeat to Hearts on Sunday, which leaves Celtic 8 points adrift of the Edinburgh club. Relations between the manager and the board have already appeared strained, with Rodgers questioning the club's transfer policy on several occasions this season. But 15 minutes after Celtic announced Rodgers' departure, a second statement followed, one from major shareholder Dermot Desmond, launching a scathing attack on Rodgers. Within the lengthy article, Desmond said this. He rejected Rodgers' claim that the club had made no commitment to him overextending his contract. Desmond insisted every player was signed with Rodgers' approval and claimed Rodgers raised no concerns with the board over transfer policy. What's more, he accused Rodgers of contributing to a toxic atmosphere by being divisive, misleading and self-serving, and blamed Celtic's recent failings on Rodgers' desire for self-preservation. This isn't the end of this incredible story. As they announced Rodgers' departure, they confirmed Martin O'Neill's appointment as interim manager. It comes more than 25 years after O'Neill was first appointed Celtic manager. He's 73 and hasn't managed a club for more than 6 years. O'Neill will be assisted by Sean Maloney. It was only yesterday morning that O'Neill was on TalkSport talking up Hearts' chances of winning the Scottish Premiership this season. Right, good morning to Lianne Sanderson. Remarkable turn of events. A few questions here. One, what does it do to Brendan Rodgers' reputation? And can you see him looking for a quick return to football? And if he is, it's quite hard to see a Premier League club, given that the clubs at the bottom have tended to already change their manager, with the exception of Wolves. Yeah,
I mean, firstly, when this news broke last night, I think it was a big shock to everybody.
Very.
Maybe not potentially that Brendan was leaving, but the timing of it. I got in from the under-23s game last night in Northampton, and I was like, what am I seeing here? Now, Dermot Desmond doing this type of statement, I'd be absolutely fuming if I was Brendan Rodgers, because it's almost like defamation of character, isn't it? A lot of players have played under Brendan Rodgers, and maybe he has created an environment like that, but who is he to come out and say that without Brendan Rodgers being able to protect himself? So that's why I'm saying I expect Brendan Rodgers to do a statement relatively soon, because I wouldn't be happy with just hearing that one side of the story. You know, yeah, the result of the weekend wasn't good enough against Hearts, yes, but they are still champions. You know, and in football, I think there needs to be a little bit more balance, and it becomes toxic. This is why it's become toxic, because of stuff like this. So if I was Brendan Rodgers, I would not be happy with how this has all gone down. And it's a shame, really, isn't it? Because he loves that club. You can tell he does. He's gone back there. You know, his family always talk about how much they love being there. And it's a shame that it's got to this point. And I'm sure for Celtic fans, you know, it's not good. And I would not be happy with Dermot Desmond coming out with this.
He's had a lot of success at the club as well, so we are waiting to hear, well, whether we'll hear from Brendan Rodgers. I'm sure we'll at some point. But in terms of his replacement, it's Martin O'Neill at the moment, but Ange Postecoglou is the favourite with the bookies to take the job on a permanent basis. Does that make sense for him to return, just like Rodgers did?
Honestly, like, there's just a conveyor belt of managers, isn't there? I mean, gone are the days where it was Alan Pardew, Tony Pulis and Sam Allardyce. It was on a conveyor belt of coaches, wasn't it? And I think someone like Ange Postecoglou, like, sometimes these managers need to take a step back and take a break. You know, John Dykes took a step back for a number of months, then came back to management. And I think, you know, it wears on you. The psychological side of being a manager, I mean, Ange Postecoglou at Tottenham, won the Europa League, then gets sacked, goes to Nottingham Forest, was in charge for like a month, then gets sacked. I mean, I know he did well at Celtic, and I'm sure the fans would welcome him back. But, like, these managers, Tom, the amount of money they must be getting, you know, from being sacked and coming back into management. Like, and Martin O'Neill, he's a top guy. I've worked with Martin a number of times, you know, doing different games and stuff. But, like, this isn't Henrik Larsson times. You know, football has moved on. And like I said, Martin O'Neill is a top guy. But the fact that this has probably come out of nowhere for Martin O'Neill.
Yeah, if he was on TalkSport yesterday morning, I mean, he might just be incredibly professional. But if he was talking about Hearts' chances of winning the league, he must have known yesterday morning, I'm guessing, that he was going to be Celtic interim manager by that evening?
I don't know about that, you know, because firstly, I know Martin's a very honest guy and he's the type of person, he is professional. You know, he talks about football. When these managers do talk about football, you listen. You know, a bit like when I've worked with Steve McLaren, like, you know, people can make fun of certain managers in certain moments, but they break football down and it's an art and it's a skill. I don't think Martin O'Neill did know. I could be wrong. You know, I work for TalkSport as well.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
But at the same time,
it didn't sound like he knew this was happening.
Not at all. And it's all a bit strange, really. And like I said, if you're a Celtic, you know, fan, you want some type of balance. You know, yes, it doesn't look like they're going to win the league, but at the same time, like they did last year, Brendan Rodgers has had great success at that club, and it just becomes a little bit. This is a type of behaviour that I think makes it toxic. And if I'm Brendan Rodgers, I would be coming out defending myself, not coming out swinging. Do you know what I mean? Being professional, obviously. But if you wake up and you hear that type of stuff and it's coming, but you feel like you're being personally attacked, it might be true, but it might not be true. And we live in a world where who is anyone to judge? And I think someone like Brendan Rodgers has a right to speak, and I think he will.
Yeah, well, let's get the fan view right now then. And podcaster John Dykes from A Celtic State of Mind. John, when we spoke to you yesterday, I knew I'd be speaking to you soon, but I didn't realise it was going to be only 24 hours later. We know that relations were strained, but did this take you by surprise as much as it did for the neutral?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think last night will be looked back on as an evening that absolutely shook Celtic to its very core. It came out of nowhere. Lianne makes some tremendous points there in relation to the toxicity of this. Nothing is more toxic than that statement from Dermot Desmond last night. That was a disgrace. I want to just put everybody in the picture here when it comes to Dermot Desmond's involvement with Celtic. Dermot Desmond does not own Celtic Football Club, nor is he the majority shareholder of Celtic Football Club. He is a non-executive director with 34.7% of the shareholding, yet he is sacking and recruiting managers with impunity. Not just that, he's taken over the official club communication channels and making that statement. I was talking about leadership yesterday, as you know, Tom. That's not leadership.
Well, it's not. Why wasn't there a statement by... who's the CEO? Is there a director of football there? Why wasn't the statement from them?
Exactly. This is the problem. The CEO is Michael Nicholson. Michael Nicholson has not said a word since last night. The chairman of the football club is Peter Lawwell. Again, silent. You have someone who is merely a shareholder, a Celtic fan with a wee bit more money than me, and he's making these decisions. It's a disgrace.
What's his how much is his shareholding? Because depending on how much he's got, he probably feels that he can say what he likes.
He's got 34.7%. He does not own the football club. He's not a majority shareholder. And the football club needs leaders in that boardroom to step up in times like this. He has blamed Brendan Rodgers for the toxicity at the football club. The fan protest has nothing to do with Brendan Rodgers. It's all about the leadership from the boardroom.
So does this make it even worse? You've been on a few times talking about how the relationship between the fans and the board isn't great. It sounds like this is going to get a lot worse.
We have a game on Wednesday night. We've got to win it to stay in the title race. We've got a semi-final on Sunday. We need to win that as well. Fans are not happy. This has nothing to do with one transfer window or being knocked out by Kairat Almaty. We can trace this back decades of interference from the boardroom when it comes to football matters. And this, seriously, this is the straw that broke the camel's back last night.
But where do you really go from here? Because, you know, the fans, obviously, there's a lot of nostalgia with someone like Martin O'Neill. But at the same time, it's like, you know, you speak about it, it is about the fans, isn't it? But the problem wasn't Brendan Rodgers. And I think there needs to be a little bit more balance here when it comes to, like, I agree with what you're saying completely. Like, you know, the fans are really the heart and soul of that football club. We know Scottish fans, very passionate, and I love that about them. But at the same time, like, realistically, linking Ange Postecoglou, Martin O'Neill coming in, I don't genuinely believe that he knew he was going to be taken over on an interim basis yesterday.
I agree with you. I don't think he knew either. I mean, the statement around Hearts would suggest to me that Martin O'Neill had no clue to yesterday morning. And that shows you how knee-jerk this particular part of the decision process has been. If Celtic decide that it's time for Brendan to go and Martin O'Neill comes in, and you're right, Martin O'Neill is a hero. He is a talismanic figurehead who's coming into Celtic Football Club. He will give it balance. Sean Maloney will do the stuff on the training pitch. But Martin O'Neill coming in, that's fine as well. It's the statement from Dermot Desmond, and that just throws fuel to the fire. That's toxic. That's more toxic than anything Brendan Rodgers. Brendan Rodgers has brought success to this football club, trebles. He has only failed to win one League Cup and one Scottish Cup over both tenures. This is a man who's never failed to win the league. Yes, we're not looking great right now, but the biggest issue at the moment is recruitment. He doesn't have a right winger to play. He doesn't have a centre forward to play. Is that on Brendan Rodgers? That's on the CEO and the CFO who failed to get the deals done in January.
On TalkSport right now, by the way, they're actually running an interview with Martin O'Neill that our former colleague Jim White has done with him, and he does confirm that he was called late last night about this. So we're all right when we said that it didn't sound like he knew what this was happening yesterday morning when he was on the radio. And he also says that this is a short-term one. He's not expecting to be there for a particularly long time while they look for somebody. In terms of going forward, yeah, OK, Martin O'Neill's there now. It is Ange Postecoglou who is the favourite. Do you want to see him back? I know that your problem is mainly with the board, but in terms of they do have to appoint a manager, should it be Ange Postecoglou? Is there anyone else in your mind?
Well, I think that what it shows is that we're going back to the well. You know, Brendan Rodgers has been a manager twice, Neil Lennon's been a manager twice, and now Martin O'Neill's been a manager twice. Do we go back to Ange Postecoglou, or do we find the best candidate for the position by scouring the entirety of Europe and beyond? Because this is something we don't do. We're just going back to someone who we understand can do the job and know the demands of the football club. Ange is a hero at Celtic. I'll tell you one thing about Ange. When he came to Celtic, the recruitment was far better than it is now.
Obviously, you play tomorrow night against Falkirk. Like, what do you think the atmosphere is going to be like at Selby Park? Because we talk about the toxicity of this type of statement, but what do you think the reaction is going to be like from the fans?
Well, the thing, Lianne, with the fans is that Martin O'Neill is a hero. You've already said that, and he is. I mean, he took us to just our third European final in 2003. The man is incredible. First treble since Jock Stein in the 1960s. But he hasn't managed for 6 years. And he left Celtic 20 years ago. Sean Maloney will be doing all the stuff on a training park, but that's not unusual. When you speak to people like Chris Sutton, that's what Martin did back in the day as well. So you're going to have the welcoming back of Martin O'Neill. Absolutely. We'll need to back the team because the team needs our backing. But what I would say is the board have ramped this up. And Dermot Desmond, who should be at the AGM next month, will be a new target of this campaign if he hasn't been already.
Is one thing that the board could do now is say, right, OK, we are going to appoint a director of football. And Brendan Rodgers used to have Lee Congerton there, didn't he, in his first spell? We appoint a director of football, and we are going to let the director of football work with the manager stroke head coach, and we are not going to interfere. Would that go some way to making you see a brighter future?
Yeah, the only way back for me, for Dermot Desmond, is he's taken a flamethrower to the dugout here. He needs to do the same to the boardroom. The CEO, the CFO, they need to go. The chairman, he needs to go. And only then can we rebuild the structure of the football club.
With just the manager again, just going back to that, we've talked about Ange Postecoglou and you saying, do you scour Europe to get the best one? Is there any names in your mind maybe from down in England? Because Celtic is still a massive, massive draw. And there will be people who will say, well, I can go up to Celtic and I'll back myself to win loads and loads of trophies for my own CV. And it seems like it would be very difficult to say no to Celtic.
Yeah, you do have that. Eddie Howe said no to us, though, which was very unfortunate.
Yeah.
But what we got in response to that was Ange Postecoglou. So we don't look back on that with too much regret. The issue we have here is a lack of ideas, and we're going back to the well time and time again. There are many managers who would come to Celtic Football Club and build a winning side and do something in Europe. Absolutely, you're right, this is a big draw. But I'll tell you something, the toxicity of that statement last night does them no favours for bringing in a new manager.
And also, as well, like, do you think, like, you know, if Dermot Desmond and the board do end up going because the fans have this kind of revolt where they don't want them in charge, do you think this problem could have been solved by them removing themselves as opposed to Brendan Rodgers being the problem? Because it seems like he's had conversations with them about players he wants to bring in. They're blocking the transfers. So for Dermot Desmond to come out and now speak like this because Brendan Rodgers wanted to bring players in, that's what it seems to me.
Yeah, Brendan Rodgers wanted the best for Celtic. He wanted to build on the Bayern Munich results of February. Crazy to think it was just February that we went toe-to-toe with Bayern Munich. Everybody knew what we had to do. We had to replace players. We had to replace quality with quality. If you look at 4 players that we have sold and 2 who are injured, we have lost 125 goals and assists from last season. Brendan wanted to bring in quality so that Celtic did better. What is toxic in that? Yeah, Dermot Desmond has to look at the boardroom now. So if he's made a decision with regards to the manager, then he needs to make a decision in the boardroom.
I think when I was asking you there about, you know, a manager coming in and knowing that they're going to win some trophies or backing themselves to win trophies on their CV. That was probably a little bit cynical of me there. Is it a worry that a manager might come in and use it as a stepping stone to improve their CV? Because Rodgers left the first time. Ange Postecoglou left as well once they had those trophies under their belt. How do you avoid that kind of situation happening where you get someone who wants to be a Celtic forever?
You know this, I think with regards to Celtic, both in management and on the playing side, it's normalised now that, we will find a new hero, but that hero will leave within 2 or 3 years. And I think that's normalised. And we know that if they leave, that's because they've done well, generally, not this time round. So if a manager was to come in and build up his CV and move on, that means that he's done well for Celtic. So to be honest with you, that's now a normalised situation, both on the park and in the dugout.
And very quickly to end, does this help your chance of winning the title or hinder them?
I have big doubts about that. This has been a massive risk by Dermot Desmond, who's obviously at the heart of it because he made a personal statement, not a professional one, last night. Huge risk. I'm not convinced. All
right. Paul, John, thanks very much indeed. I'm sure we'll get you on when the next thing happens. Yeah, probably see you again tomorrow and Thursday.
Pleasure. Thank you. Anytime.